This was a chunk of ice. One of those things that's very fascinating to look at when the sun is low on the water. You get to see through the ice with a very different perspective.
What you're going to see when you are visiting places like this.
I could see to the north an eerie white high point that I couldn't quite make out on the horizon. And sure enough, it was the Greenland ice cap, making the crossing over to the Damut. And beyond that is the Upernavik ice fjord with all its ice. When I was paddling in 1992 in this area, there was so much ice because Mount Pinatubo had erupted that it was impossible for me to even imagine getting into this area because it was just packed with ice. Now I could see from my kayak those farther islands out there in Upernavik ice fjord. I'd never been here before, and I had no idea what was in store. This was a chunk of ice. One of those things that's very fascinating to look at when the sun is low on the water. You get to see through the ice with a very different perspective. This is a map of my general paddling route on the way back to Pilatalk along the Upernavik ice fjord. As I was paddling along, it was getting colder and colder. And then I came into an area that had much denser ice, and I became really concerned about whether I could get through this ice. And as I was going past some ice, a chunk popped up and hit the bow of my boat, and it was a very sharp piece that had calved off from the bottom of an iceberg. I realized that what I was doing was really quite dangerous. And it's very cold among all of this ice, along with the fact that if I try to pull in at camp overnight, that I might wake up the next morning and find myself completely surrounded with ice, getting to do what's called dry out, which happened to me several times when I was in Arctic Bay, Canada. Drying out is a very common experience where there is so much annual ice, such as Arctic Bay. And this is the smorgasbord of icebergs. So I am not going to cross the Upernavik ice fjord because it might be just a mass of little shards of ice. Just endless shards of ice. And I don't like this kind of risk. I have speeded this up, but I wanted to show you what an iceberg looks like when it's rolling over. Very frightening. I recorded this in Kusloswak when a giant iceberg was breaking up. To show you the kind of waves they generate, you have to know how to surf in a kayak. This is just to show you the amount of debris that an iceberg instantly generates. Something also to think about when you're kayaking near them. Million pieces, which is not a good thing. This is a good one. I have slow motioned this. And Espen Nielsen recorded this at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were living in Upernavik at that time, and he caught this experience just perfectly because people had suggested that they thought this would break apart at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it can cause enormous waves. And here's in slow motion the large and steep wave it generated, just so you can see what happens when an ice arch collapses.
We got it on video.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the big question.
Watch it, it'll shift. Move, and keep going.
There's no UFO.
Oh.
Here's an example of different densities of snow in an eroded iceberg. And you can see how it compressed and reflects light quite differently. It's a beautiful turquoise light. I took a picture of this iceberg about an hour ago. It certainly has changed. It looks like it's very quietly disintegrated. At the moment I'm working my way up through this ice because there's an interesting view over beyond a great jumble of ice here. I'm behind a hillock, and I'm not sure if I can make it around. But well, it's one thing to read about ice, and it's another thing to actually be here and to see it. We're looking at off on the horizon the ice cap of Greenland. I'm not sure how much farther I can go here. Getting a little squeezy here and there. It's really scary when these things break. And this is as close as I'm going to this ice fjord. I think this is as far north as I will paddle my kayak. It's just getting a little too crowded here. And the problem is when one of these decides to go over, it's a rather violent experience. I really don't want to find out firsthand what it's really going to be like.
This is in the Arswit area, north of Upernavik.
And this is the smorgasbord of icebergs. Just endless shards of ice. And I don't like this kind of risk.
I have speeded this up, but I wanted to show you what an iceberg looks like when it's rolling over. Very frightening. I recorded this in Kuzloswak when a giant iceberg was breaking up. To show you the kind of waves they generate, you have to know how to surf in a kayak. This is just to show you the amount of debris that an iceberg instantly generates. Something also to think about when you're kayaking near them. This is what's considered the most unstable type of iceberg. It has a sawtooth top. It's dirty. It's very unstable. And while I was camping on Pugata Island, I heard it breaking up the entire night. So that by morning, it was just endless shards.
This iceberg in view is a very dangerous type of iceberg that can just break up into a million pieces, which is not a good thing. And it can cause enormous waves.
These are views in Arctic Bay of annual ice for you to compare.
This ice also has another sound. It's quite fragmented, melting away very quickly. This is a fast game of Beat the Berg. I just decided I think I'm going to quit this game. Because there's no sense playing games with these sharp things. They're nasty, and especially when they're coming right at you. And it looks to me like the tide's given up and it's going out anyway, against the way I'm going. By looking at this piece of ice, if you're in Greenland, you would automatically assume it would have to be glacial. But in this instance, we're not in an area where there are icebergs. This is a multi-year piece of ice. Everything is horizontally oriented on it. There's nothing to show that it has changed its center of gravity at any time. Being laid out horizontally as this ice in the foreground, it's just built up from year to year. As you saw it, since the ice hasn't gone out, just head back west. This is illustrating the tricky side of an unseen wave that is coming in here from an iceberg that has broken off on the outside. It's one of those things you can't see, but there it is. So you have to be careful about what you do with your kayak when you're getting in and out of it or going in shallow areas. This is the same area now that it's quiet. Interesting shape for an iceberg to have melted into. It's very interesting, the bizarre color. Some interesting shapes in icebergs. When an iceberg drops even a small section of ice off of its side, it makes quite a huge noise and spreads out a long way from the berg itself. This is because the temperature difference between the berg and the water is large. It's kind of like a major explosion when that ice chunk hits the water. And this is something you have to be aware of when you're boating, especially in a kayak.
Thank you for watching my video. This is Gail Ferris, your narrator and videographer.